What a pleasure for me to have a chance to sit down calmly in the heat of the week of weeks to talk with my good friend and colleague, Michael Dake.
Well, that's reciprocal, Michael. This is the best fun I've had all day. So
Well,
looking forward to it.
That's not saying much.
Looking
All right,
forward
first
to
of all, let's start off right from the top. What did you do last weekend?
Last weekend, I went to my 40th, that's 40 years, Harvard reunion, and had the time of my life.
All right, so Harvard undergrad.
Harvard undergrad.
Now, you'll remember when we did the Live Award, and I had all that stuff on you about your time back in college, but many people weren't there. So tell me about your experience. What was it that, I mean, I can tell you what I thought, but what was it that you thought was the coolest thing about your Harvard undergrad experience?
Oh, it's the people. And you're in the Harvard system now, and for those people who aren't in the Harvard system, this isn't just, we're not talking about this is better or whatever.
No.
It's just they're so interesting. And I spent a lot of my time working for the newspaper, the Harvard Crimson, and met some lifelong friends. And at this reunion, the thing that is just going around like now on internet and texting and everybody, this incredible like rekindle like a house of fire, these people just back and forth and stuff. Who knew, you know? I mean, bringing back this experiences that now, you know, just seem ancient, if not obviously historical, but we had so much fun. And it was just, you know, it's not about going to school. As you know, college is not about going to school. It's about experiencing things and especially people.
All right, so you grew up in Indiana?
Yep.
Where?
South Bend, Indiana.
South Bend. So does that
It had
mean
nothing to do with Notre Dame, though.
do you have any allegiance to Notre Dame?
My father was a high school principal, so I was a townie. And there at the time was an extreme sort of, I think it would be animosity is not too strong between the townies and the Notre Dame. Probably 7 kids a year from our town went to Notre Dame. Now, here's the problem. Notre Dame back then, because I'm so old, was not a particularly good school. Now, top 20 school.
Great school.
Why is it a top 20 school? Because in a stroke of a pen, they started admitting women. So now we had double the applicant pool for the same number of places, and it became a really good school, and it still is. Now, South Bend, Notre Dame, very symbiotic. When I was there, not even the top 10 of employers, now #1 by far in the city.
So how many people who were townies in South Bend actually went to Harvard undergrad? There couldn't have been that many. Come on.
You mean in the history of the
No,
town?
but
my
back in
year?
your era.
Nobody.
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 Right.
There were
So-
9 people from the state of Indiana.
All right.
That was,
Well, that's
that
more
was
than
our
I-
geographic quota. It's sort of like congressional populist representation.
Yeah.
They got to have people from Wyoming and Indiana and North Dakota. That's
Okay, so you finished Harvard undergrad,
Yep.
and did you know that you wanted to be a doctor the whole time, or was it just in some time you had an epiphany?
No. So the one thing that was clearly out in my class was business school. The Harvard Business School, you are a graduate, was basically begging people to come across, you know,
Yeah.
just with all sorts of, you know, sort of enticements to come across the river. Everyone couldn't do that. That was just too, you know, non-PC at the
Yep.
time. So I was going to be a journalist, and I liked journalism very much, but it was very unclear to me if that would be a living, you know, and how good would I be, and a lot of uncertainty and sort of, you know, lack of confidence. But I got an offer of a job to go to New York and work for ABC Sports for Roone Arledge. Now, Roone Arledge graduated to become head of news, but at the time he was sports, and it was the wide world of sports days and Jim McKay.
Sure.
And I thought about that, and then I had 2 or 3 roommates who were going to medical school, and it just seemed, you know, and so I was a physical sciences major. So that's everything in science except biology, which kind of didn't expose me to much about medicine. So I had to, you know, quickly, my senior year, take care of all that. And so I also took the Foreign Service exam. Michael, I don't know if you ever thought
That
about
I
anything
didn't
like
know.
that. I took the Foreign Service exam and made it through the written test, and that invited me down to New York to sit like sort of an interview with like 9 people in a room. So I walk in the room, and I have I'm a physical sciences major.
Yeah.
I'm not history, I'm not government, I'm
Not
not
political
politics.
science,
I don't know
nothing.
what the hell.
Right.
And the first question is, what can you tell me about the composition and the general environment of the Balkans during World War I?
Right off the top,
right
of
off
the tip
the
of my
bat.
tongue.
Right off the top, the only thing I could think to say, I was trying to think, I don't even know, was Albania was all I could say. I knew nothing about it. That was, and just immediately you have one of those out-of-world experiences where you're sweating. How did I get here? Clearly bad idea, that sort of thing. So needless to say, that was a loser.
Okay, so med school where?
Baylor in Houston.
Okay.
Great place. Why did I go there? I went down, and as we go for interviews, things are impressive. That was very impressive.
Yeah.
Texas Medical School is impressive. At that time, again, a long time ago, Texas was a pretty kind of, it was kind of this in place. It was a little cowboy chic. Everyone, Texas was cool. That, I shouldn't say anymore, but maybe that's not the case now. But I really enjoyed the experience there. And I had a medical school experience which was not heavy on a lot of research, but high on patient volume. We could keep patients alive. We maybe didn't have the latest leading edge research experience or exposure, but keeping patients going we could because there were just such a volume and the intensity of work.
Now I'm telling you, most people who don't know you don't know all the incredible different twists and turns you did after medical school. But I do know, and it doesn't surprise me at all knowing you now like I do, but so after medical school, you went into what training program?
Internal medicine.
Okay. And you thought for sure you were going to be a pulmonologist, critical care guy, right?
Yes.
And you actually did that.
I did that at UCSF.
Yep.
And during that experience, I was not really satisfied with my clinic. Pulmonary internal medicine, you got to like clinic. You got to like this. And you got to really, and at that time, a lot of self-inflicted smoking disease. We hadn't come into, AIDS and HIV at the time. So it was real garden variety COPD. And I was spending a lot of time at the Moffitt Hospital chest reading room. And one day, the head of chest radiology, after 6 months, said, "Have you ever thought about radiology?" And I said, "No, why would I ever want to do that?" And, I thought it was, what a goof, no. So I left, and 2 weeks later, I came back and sort of thought, this was sounding pretty good. So I went up to him and said, 2 weeks ago you mentioned this. What were you meaning? And he goes, well, we've got this unexpected opening in the first year class. Someone we accepted isn't going to be able to come. You've been here. We've gotten to know you. But you want to come? And I went, absolutely. So I just switched from being a pulmonary, I'm board certified in pulmonary critical care. One day I was that. The next day I was a first year. And I remember, Michael, they came to me and said, you've spent all this time, you can skip a year. And I said, what do you mean I could skip a year? He said, well, the usual training is this much, but we'll give you credit for 1 year. And I said, well, okay, but let me think about that. I'm all in, but let me think about if I'm going to do the full. And so I went to a couple noon conferences. And the whole thing in radiology, when you're a radiology resident, is differential diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I happened to pick a conference which was centered on MSK, musculoskeletal bone radiology, and they put this film up, and the guy said the differential is PVNS or EG. I had been through medical school, internal medicine, pulmonary. I had no idea what this guy was talking about. It turned out it was pigmented villonodular synovitis versus eosinophilic granuloma, neither of which, again, was like the Balkans. I was
going to say I'd be better off with the Balkans.
I could say nothing intelligent about either one of those, and I went back and said, no, I'm in for the full Monty. I'm not cutting a year out of this. That was a good move. I'm very glad I did.
All right, so a little unknown fact to the audience. When we were putting VIVA together, I remember sitting around a table with Gary and Jim and John, and I said, we got to get a radiologist. And Jim Joy says, well, what about Michael Dake? And I said, there ain't no way Michael Dake's going to work with us. Because at the time, you had really rocketed in your career. So many people who look at you now think you're the stent graft guy. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, I remember idolizing you, no joke, during your times with Charlie Semba, doing thrombolytic therapy. Really at the vanguard of that. Now, how'd you get into that?
First, you're too kind. But secondly, no one had done venous thrombolysis.
Right.
And today it seemed, but this was a long time ago. And arterial, I knew how to do it. At the time, thrombolysis arterial was much more of an art than a science. I remember in my fellowship year at UCSF, I just was struggling with, because it seemed too, it wasn't yet a recipe, it was all this kind of black magic and mumbo jumbo. How much of this, and did you use heparin as well, and how did you do that, and how many different ports were you putting it through? But I became comfortable with it, and then I said, well, why couldn't you do this in a vein? So we started doing it and in veins, and it was just, happened to be the time. And there are a lot of those things, I'm sure, in your life and my life, when you just happen to be at the time. It wasn't necessarily the place, it was the time. And we had some good success, and we learned about not only thrombolysis, but the use of stents, because that was coming in at the same time. And so a lot of things happened then that were just kind of about keeping your eyes open, and including stents we published the first carotid stent of all things. I mean, people had done it before, but we published the first series on carotid stents and this iliofemoral lysis. And that turned out to be a very exciting thing. Yeah.
People don't know this. Who trained you in interventional vascular radiology?
Ernie Ring, my mentor. I still hold him up as sort of a demigod, if you will. He was at the Mass General, came out of Detroit, sort of like me, out of Indiana, went to went to Wayne State Medical School, and then came to the General. And from the General, he went to UPenn, and I mean, absolutely one of the clearest thinkers, just laser sharp mind, and a great sense of not only judgment, but just the right thing to do.
All right, I got the high sign. So after that, you went to work with?
Barry Katzen.
All right. So tell me about that. He had just moved to Miami?
He just moved to Miami. I had just finished my fellowship. I was the staff at San Francisco General Hospital, which was a busy place, but a lot of trauma. And Ernie Ring called me up and he said, listen, I got a really good friend of mine who's moved to Miami. He needs help now. He really needs help. And so I talked to him. I went down there. We went down to interview. Barry wasn't there. So I went to this hospital and it was kind of, Florida, Miami, couldn't quite figure it out. Barry came back and he took me out. His recruiting was to go out on a boat.
Of course.
Of course. My wife and I and Barry's wife, Judy, we all went on a boat and we got pulled over by the FBI to search the boat. We're in Miami Harbor and they're looking for drugs in our boat. And we all had to, it was so crazy. And
That's
of course
classic.
he was, kind of embarrassed as much as Barry can be embarrassed because they, like all sorts of, searchlights going through the boat. Obviously, we finally got out of there. And so I went down there and had a great 2 years, but I had an opportunity to go back to Stanford, and that was, again.
All right, we got a short time left. You ready?
Yep.
Free association.
Yes.
Favorite place in the world you visited?
Holy cow, that is so tough, but I'm going to go Italy, and I'm taking the whole country with me.
Perfect. What do you like to do when you're not working?
When I'm not working, I like to go to art museums.
Tell me the thing you do with your family on vacations, that story. You got to tell that story.
We have a great story, and I've told Michael and some of the other guys. We do mystery trips. And this started when we spent a sabbatical in Rome. That's why I'm in Italy. Year 2000, the millennium year, the Jubilee year in Rome, the whole family, 4 kids, into Italian school. We spent a year in Rome, and that's when I started this idea of mystery trips, meaning it's the weekend, you don't know where you're going, only I know. And we're going to pack and leave. You don't know if we're going train, auto, ship, car, and next thing you know, we'd be in Morocco. And they'd be freaking out with the call to prayers and everything. And so that, since now, we translated that back, and we still do it. The only time we can do it now, because all my kids are older, is the holiday right before New Year's, that period of time. And so we'll go every year. It's a tradition, and awesome. Many times they're disgruntled by where I'm taking them, but many times they're pleasantly surprised.
So I'm going to tell everybody here in Vegas that you should make an effort to go up and talk to Mike during this week. He is the nicest guy, incredibly smart, futuristic in thought. Always a pleasure, my brother.
Thanks, Michael. It's been great. Thank you.